How was your Christmas and New Year? If you have any questions, please just, oh my God, this is totally on the wrong side of me. Oh Lord, this is not going to work out well. Anyway, we're here. We made it. Happy New Year? Not yet. Almost. The countdown is on. 2 more days until 2024. I have had people reach out who want to lose weight in the new year, and a lot of these people work 14-hour days. So let's talk about how you can automate fat loss even whilst working 14-hour days. So really, there's 3 things you want to have in place. Anything that you want to automate, you need to have systems surrounding. So what systems do you have in place that allow you to be active, that allow you to prioritize your health, that allow you to eat sufficient protein each day? I mean, a lot of these things I've talked about before, where people stumble is the application. It's very rarely the information. So whilst, yes, there are still things that people have misinformation on, that people are still confused about. People still think that fasted cardio is better for fat loss because apparently you're losing fat when you do fasted cardio. There's still misconceptions of that nature. Truth be told, just because you're using fat as a fuel source doesn't mean that you are losing fat. You can still be in a caloric surplus whilst doing fasted cardio and not see any change at all. So that's just one example. But really, where people stumble is the application, because people don't sit down and plan and be intentional about their lives. They constantly live in a reactive state, replying, responding, replying, responding, replying, responding every single second of their working day, thinking that they're being effective when really they're just being reactive. So what you want to do is you really want to dedicate some time towards mapping out different routines you can build and establish, which are going to make it easier for you to be a healthier version of yourself. Now, for fat loss, we need 2 things. We need a caloric deficit with sufficient protein, because that's going to ensure that you're not losing muscle. Now, if you have heard me rant before, you know I'm big on protein, and you know that my foot in the door is 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight per day. So that's going to look like 90 grams of actual protein every single day if you're a person who weighs 60 kilograms. Now, that's just a starting point. I mean, ideally, that number is closer to 2. However, most people are barely getting 1 gram per kilo. So my first goal with people is to get them to that 1.5 mark before then pushing them to reach closer to 2 and even beyond. I myself am on about 2.4 grams per kilo of what I weigh. Guess what? My kidneys and liver are still fine. What do you know? So the 2 items that you need, again, for fat loss: sufficient protein with a caloric deficit. Now, caloric deficit looking like a 15 to 20% deficit as a starting point, and being consistent with that. But again, none of that is really news to you. If you've been here before, if you're familiar with my content on my page, then that is not surprising, and that is not really news for you. So again, where we want to put our efforts and attention and energy is on the application. And the application means sitting down each week and looking at your schedule and putting your workouts on the damn schedule. Now, that takes time. And that's the work that most people avoid. So this is the hard work that people don't do, and that's why people don't get results, or they certainly don't keep their results. So put it in your schedule. Allocate 15 minutes every Sunday, every Saturday. Look at your calendar for the week ahead and block off that 1 to 2 hours of where you're going to travel to the gym, do your workout, change and travel back home or back to work, wherever you're working from, and build that routine to the point where it feels like it's second nature, where you don't even have to think about it, where it just happens. Now, you have to understand that requires repetition as well. So it's not going to feel second nature until you've done it, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 times. The other part of the equation is building that into your psyche and your self-identity. So a lot of people are going to start but they're going to start making efforts to lose weight with doubt in mind because they're afraid they won't be able to continue because they've started many times before and not continued. And so, what do we do with that? We have to train the eye to see success. When your eye is trained to see shortcomings and see failures, then it's going to be easy to default to that lens. Now, if you want to get the hell out of your own way, you have to build a belief system that allows you to see you as a person who just regularly works out. You're a person who just regularly eats nourishing foods, a person who regularly gets 7 hours of sleep, a person who regularly drinks 4 liters of water a day, whatever the case may be. Now, you stand no chance of creating any long term change when your belief system remains the same. And this is the work that people don't do. This is the unglamorous work that people don't do. People start by trying to change their behaviors before they change their belief system, not realizing that it's the belief system which underpins their behaviors in the first place. So we need to look at what beliefs do we hold that make it easy for us to behave in a way that makes it easy to lose fat. So again, are you a person who naturally gets enough protein each day, or you're a person who sees yourself as a yo-yo dieter? Because if you have yo-yo dieter attached to your self-identity, you stand no chance of creating that long-term change. Now, if you identify that label, then you have a level of self-awareness that can help you to unpick and unpack that further to the point of that no longer being a barrier, to the point where that is no longer a stumbling block. But without that awareness, you can't do anything. So when we have awareness, we have a fork in the road and we have choice where we can either add a tool to our toolbox or we default to the only tool that we have, right? So what I like to do with my clients is I get them a list of, I get them a lined piece of paper, stick it to the back of their door, and I get them to add to that list items that we're looking to build belief in. So, for example, if you are a person who feels that they struggle with consistency and you struggle to do something long term, then I want you to start a list that you keep on the back of your door where you write down all the examples of what you have started and continued with. Because here's the thing, if you have continued to quit, you've actually been consistent at quitting, right? I mean, it's just a different way of looking at it. So people are so quick to get in their own way. People can be so quick to shoot themselves down and shoot themselves in the foot because they're just looking at something with a disempowering lens. And there are so many different ways to see the same thing. Now, if you're determined to see yourself as being a failure, always the fattest person in the room, someone who always has one too many drinks, has that fifth drink when they said they were going to have four, or goes for the third instead of the second, stopping at number two, then again, it's going to be very challenging to get yourself to where you want to be. So, what do you have evidence of, and what evidence are you looking for when you go about creating change? If you're constantly looking for evidence that you suck, that you can't do this, that you're inconsistent, that you always make unhealthy choices, then of course you're going to stay where you are. Or any change you do create is going to be short-lived. So that list, that evidence list, what is it that you gravitate towards looking for versus what evidence do you need that's going to support you in continuing to make change? That is what you're going to add to the list. So I use this for myself when I was swimming, because when you are in a competitive sport, when your rate of physical growth starts to slow down, you don't make as many progressions as you would when you're growing. I mean, when you grow, an inch overnight, it's really easy to do personal bests, and that makes it fun. Though the rate of physical growth starts to slow down, you stop doing as many personal bests, and then training becomes a little bit more monotonous. It becomes a little bit more mundane. It becomes a little less fun when you don't see those progressions as often. And what I did was I kept a list on the back of my bedroom door. And every time I did something that I was proud of in training, I would write it on that list. And it works in two ways. It trains your eye to see what you've done well, which is great, but it also brings that to the front of your mind before you leave the house in the morning. So before I would go to training at 5:30 in the morning, I would see this list, and in training I would want to do something so well that I felt inclined to add it to this list. So it works in two ways. Long term, it trains your eye to see good. It trains your eye to see whatever it is that you're seeking to see evidence of. And it also brings that to the top of your attention so that you find it easier to behave in that way because you want to have something worthy of adding to that list. So this is a technique that I use for a lot of my clients, and it's tremendously, tremendously helpful because, again, we have a lens which has been developed over time, and that becomes your default if you don't do anything to change that or work on that or better that. So that's really, really important to remember when you are going about creating any sort of change in your lifestyle. You want to make sure that you have a lens which is optimized to see the progress that you're making. And we can be really, really quick, again, to step on the scales and see that the number is the same. Or perhaps we've put on a little bit of weight over Christmas and suddenly it's the end of the world and the sky is falling. And we're such assholes towards ourselves. Like, oh my God, I'm always going to be overweight. I'm always going to be 5 kilos heavier than I was before my first pregnancy. I'm la 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 la. Just stop being an asshole towards yourself, okay? It's not the end of the world. You can lose weight, but you have to let yourself see the change and see the progress that you're looking to create in the first place. So that is really, really important. That makes it more rewarding too, okay? Because this journey can be lonely. It can be boring. It can be full of unfun moments. Not gonna lie, like this is my 13th consecutive year of training, and I have moments where I'm like, did I even like make progress this week? Did I do anything that moves the needle this week? And honestly, yes, turning up when you least feel like it is progress. Being consistent is progress. Giving yourself permission to have a really shit workout is something that you all need to get better at doing. Because without turning up, you can't get better. I can help anyone who turns up. I absolutely cannot help anyone who doesn't. So that's worth remembering. When it comes to automating fat loss, one of the best things you can do tying into workouts is to build muscle. Honestly, because the more of you that is muscle, the more calories you are going to burn at rest. Muscle is very metabolically demanding. Okay, you require more calories to keep muscle than what you do fat. That's why fat is so damn hard to get rid of. But you probably already know that. That should not be news to you. So when it comes to automating fat loss, if you look at your body composition and how much of you is lean muscle mass, we want to increase that number, okay? And most of the women I train can easily afford to put on 5 to 10 kilograms of muscle. And really, I'm not over exaggerating when I say that. I mean, very easily 5 to 10 kilograms of muscle. So again, the benefit to that is you're going to burn more calories even when you're standing still, blinking and breathing, when you're sleeping, when you're not really doing anything too vigorous at all. If more of you as a composition is muscle mass, you're going to be burning more energy. So how do we do that? Well, we get to the gym and we lift heavy shit, and we keep lifting heavy shit until the day we die. Yes, until your very last breath. Guys, I mean, especially in your 20s, it is so beneficial because when we get towards our early 30s, naturally our testosterone levels start to decline. If you've been here before, you've heard me talk about this before, but with that comes a natural decline in muscle mass if we're not proactive in building and keeping the muscle we have. Now, when we start to lose muscle mass, our metabolism starts to slow down. And suddenly we get to mid-40s, pre-menopause starts to hit, perimenopause starts to hit, menopause starts to hit, and we think, oh my goodness, what is this fat around my stomach? What has happened here? Middle age spread. Suddenly our clothes are tight. We've got 3 different sizes of clothing in our wardrobe, and it seems as though it just happened overnight, but it didn't. This is what happened. You didn't build muscle in your 20s. You made no effort to keep that muscle in your 30s, and now you're in your 40s, and you've maybe let yourself go. That might be fair to say. You've maybe had 1, 2, or 3 children. You travel tremendously for work. You work 14, 15, 16-hour days, different time zones. You have 16,000 tabs open in your brain. No real support when it comes to emotional support. And again, if you've not made an effort to build muscle and keep muscle and build that bone density, then the body is really not going to be forgiving when it comes to that natural decline in testosterone levels. And again, once naturally testosterone starts to decline, which it does, late 20s, early 30s for women is typically the case, then we start to lose that muscle mass. And when we lose that muscle mass, then we start to see a decline in our metabolism. So that's what you want to avoid. Now, if you're hearing this and you're like, that's me, get to the gym. I don't know how else to put it. Just go to the gym and lift heavy things, and lift them in many ways. If you're going to the gym twice a week, you should be doing full body workouts with weights. An hour is great. If you have longer, even better. You want to be working the biggest muscles in the body. So the legs, the front of the legs, the back of the legs, the back itself, the chest, shoulders. If you have time, something more arm specific. So biceps, triceps, something more core specific. But really, if you're prioritizing the legs, the back, the chest, the shoulders, you are good, okay? If you're going to the gym twice a week, that should be your focus. If you're going 3 times a week, that should also be your focus. If you're going 4 times a week, you may want to alternate upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body, with obviously 2 days rest and then another day of rest in between. Or you might do 2 days of rest, and then maybe on a Saturday, for example, you go for yoga or Pilates. Or you might just do a brisk walk. You might do a 5-kilometer walk. I personally am always going to prioritize the lifting of the weights, because that is what we need the most when we get older. Women, we just need more muscle mass, okay? And that's going to be the most hard, that's going to be the most challenging thing as we get older. Naturally, that's going to be what nature is least forgiving with, okay? It's going to be the muscle mass. So my priority is always going to be the building of the muscle. If you are doing more cardio and more Pilates and more yoga than you are of lifting weights, flip it, okay? So if you're doing yoga 3 times a week and you're lifting weights once, flip it. Flip it, because again, nature doesn't want you to have that much muscle mass, but that's exactly what's going to help you to keep the fat off, especially as you age. And again, only because naturally your testosterone levels are going to go down, that's going to make it harder. Okay, so Mother Nature is against you when it comes to this. She's not on your side. Mother Nature is a bitch. I said it. So again, if you're doing more yoga, more walking, more running, so more cardio than you are of lifting weights, flip it. Your yoga should be recovery from lifting weights. Your Pilates should be recovery from lifting weights. Your long walk should be recovery from lifting weights. Your cardio, unless you have cardio-based goals, such as running a 10-kilometer half marathon, then there is no need to be so focused on cardio, truly. Your heart rate is going to go up when you lift weights anyway. So naturally, your aerobic system is going to improve when you lift weights. Now, yes, it'll improve faster if you spend some dedicated time just working on cardio, but you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone when you are doing weights, in the sense that, of course, you're working your muscles, and aerobically you're having to get stronger at the same time. So that's my 2 cents there. Now, the other thing we want to focus on is, in addition to systems, so having a meal prep system or having someone help you with that, whether it's a meal delivery service, whether it's your helper who's cooking high protein, high fiber diets, high fiber meals. You want to be consistent. And this is where I'm really different to a lot of people, because I would say consistency is doing something 50% of the time, 90% of the time. What do I mean by that? If you look at a year, and a year being 365 days, most years, then you want to be doing something more than half of the week for 90% of the days of the year. So 90% of the days of the year is all but 36 days. Okay, so 365 minus 36 leaves us with about, 325, my maths isn't the best, But let's say 325 days of the year, you want to be working out more than half of those days. Does that make sense? So, as in, you might train for 6 consecutive months where you're training 4 times a week, and then you go away and you have a 2-week holiday. That is what I mean by that. Okay. So, consistency is not 3 times this week, once next week, 3 times the next week, 5 times the week after. That's not consistency. That might be an attempt to become consistent, and that's great. But established consistency, for me, in my opinion, and I've been doing this for 15, I've been in the industry for 15 years, health and fitness industry for 15 years. I have a degree in public health, so I understand behavioral change more than your average personal trainer. Consistency really is doing something more than 50% of the time, 90% of the time. So it's that long-term view and the short-term view. So again, if we look at the whole year, did you do something more than 50% of the time for 325 days of the year? Again, that could look like 6 months of consecutive training where you're training 4 times a week and then you have a 7 to 14 day holiday. And then you come back and then you get back into the same routine. That's what that looks like. Most people have no fucking idea what consistency is. And they kid themselves when they think they're being consistent. So what to do about that? Get yourself a planner off Etsy, print it out, stick it on your fridge, and every time you do a workout, write it on the board. When we look at micro, meso, and macro, being short, mid, and long term, what I like to do is give people 3 numbers to work on. And I'm doing this with a client at the moment. With her workouts, we want to do 3 times a week, every week. And if we look at that over the span of 3 months, that looks like 39 workouts. Okay. So if we reverse engineer from there, that's going to be 13 a month. And if we go back again and look at the micro, that's going to be 3.08 a week, to be precise. 3.0805, in fact. So there are going to be some weeks, for example, Christmas and New Year, where it's a little bit more challenging, where you may carry forward that workout to the next week, whether you're above or below that number. So for example, if she were to do 2 workouts this week, because Christmas and festivities and family, then she does 4 the next week so that she averages out the same. And this is where a lot of people totally miss the mark. They think, yeah, I do 3 a week. Oh, I'm traveling next week. Oh, I'll do 2. And the week after, they're back to 3. No, you should be averaging 3. Not just doing 3 or not doing 3. You should be averaging 3. This is a massive difference, guys. Because think about all the weeks where you're not hitting that number. That adds up. You should be looking to make that up. And with my clients, the goal is to always make that session up. Not to be like, oh, I'm not here, so I'm not here. No, that's not okay. You should be averaging 3 times a week, every week. So if you're not here, then you do 4 next week, right? Or you do 4 the week before, so that the week after when you do 2, then you go back to 3 and you're averaging out 3. So look at your averages, not the actual numbers that you hit or don't hit, if that makes sense. And just make it a non-negotiable. Honestly, the more friction you can remove for yourself by making things easier, so like not being an asshole towards yourself, having high protein snacks and meals pre-planned, delivered, cooked for you by someone else, and just having non-negotiables, just being like, I just get up at 5:30 and I just exercise. Just whatever exercise that is whatever exercise that is, but I just wake up and I do it. The easier it is to automate everything. Okay, just remove friction, be consistent, and focus, which is the other thing. You can't be consistent and extreme. It doesn't work. You cannot be consistent and extreme unless you're an athlete or unless you're paid. It's different then. Okay. So a lot of people go from 0 to 100 at 0 minus 10. They lose 10 kilos, they put on 12 because they are too extreme with their approach. Go from 0, or look at a scale, 0 to 10. How good are you at eating high protein diets? Give yourself a number. If it's 3 right now, if it's a 3 out of 10, that's what you give yourself. Try and get that to a 5. then make 5 normal, then get to a 6. Then ask yourself, do I want to get to a 7? Because maybe you don't, and that's okay. But where people get in their own way is they go too hard too soon. They become too extreme, and you can't sustain extremes. Again, unless you're an athlete, unless you're paid, unless you have sponsorship, which you don't because you're not an athlete and you're not you're not sponsored by a meal prep company. Then honestly, you just got to be a little bit more real with yourself in terms of understanding your lifestyle and where you're getting to. Try and move the needle gradually, because then it's consistent. And be focused on doing 2 things. If you're not sure where to start, for me, it's protein. It's getting more protein. Okay, it's going to make the biggest difference to your body composition. The second thing is standing more than you're sitting. So stand more often than you sit, and or just increase your step count. If you average 4,000 steps a day, try and get to 5,500 or 6,000. And really, just get really damn good at doing those 2 things. When you're really, really, really good at those 2 things, then work on a third thing. Shift your attention to something else. So long as you're still remaining consistent at the other 2 items, then it's fine. If your attention shifting to something else means your consistency in the other 2 areas starts to decline, then drop it. Just go back to those 2 things, okay? So all this to say, no change is long-lasting until you're consistent at doing it. And if you've done something 1,000 ways, then that is normal. You have to do it 2,000 ways before a new normal can be established. So you have to be patient with yourself. Behavioral change takes time, and it takes so much longer than you think it does. Like, so much longer. And I know that because I've studied it. You haven't. You think you're a light switch, and you can't just flick the switch on and flick the switch off. Because if you could, you would be a robot. You're not a robot. So again, patience. But also having tools to increase your awareness surrounding how consistent you are makes a big difference. So again, printing off planners from Etsy, having habit tracking apps, having spreadsheets you can use on Google Sheets to kind of log what you do and when you do it, that all really helps. But it makes no difference if you don't use it. So they are some of my top tips on how you can automate fat loss whilst working 14-hour days. The systems I've used to help busy working women achieve just that. Systems I've used for myself to lose 15 kilos and keep them off. And this is my 13th year of training, and I've continued to keep the weight off. So it works if you do it, but that's the thing, you got to do it. So give it a go. Let me know how you go. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.